everyone. Thanks for joining in. Hi from the other side of the country. I've wanted to visit Melbourne. I'm normally there a few times a year, but this has not been the year for it. But good to see everyone's faces again. Good to see that Martin's a true mobile developer and he's actually coding this from the road. I can see your motorbike there. That's really awesome. That's really, really neat. So what I'm going to talk about, as Lachlan hinted at, is look at widgets in iOS 14. And it's something I've been doing for a chunk of months, really, ever since it got announced. And it's one of those things that's also not really documented that much. I think Michael's on the call as well. I just saw him tweet just before this meetup that he just implemented that. So Michael, I'm going to put a call out. I'd love to actually see what you've done if you don't mind showing it a little bit later. Just unmute or type in the chat window. But I'm going to look at widgets, how it's implemented, the process of putting it in your app, and how you go through it. So there's a bit of configuration, there's a bit of code, not only Xamarin code, but also some Swift code. We'll look at some of the other elements. So some of this stuff is not baked in. So I'm going to show you some links to resources that are useful in getting this working. And just basically take you through some stuff. So who is this guy speaking? That's me. I'm Glenn. I think most people have met me or have seen me at a talk or two in the Xamarin space. I'm, like Lachlan said, I'm a senior content developer for Microsoft. I also run my own company. I've got apps on the App Store that have been there for 7 years and they're still selling, and kind of enjoying that process. And I think the reason I probably focus on iOS is because I sell far more iOS apps than I do Android apps on that side. So it's a kind of a Darwinian reward system just for me. I've been coding for a long, long time. I do like mobile apps. I like to dive into things, and I've been building an app for a long time, over 20 years. And this is the app that I've been building that I'm adding widgets to I want to have all these capabilities. I'll give you a brief demo of it and how I'm going to show you why I think widgets are useful in the first place. But we're going to step through essentially these steps: the need for configuration, app groups, which is something that you may not have used in Xamarin.Forms already. So I'm going to talk about some Xamarin iOS specific things today, but all of this is going to apply to Xamarin.Forms. So even when I go through the demo, I'm going to make a Xamarin.Forms app because I think that's what most people are doing anyway. I'm going to look at how we configure some things in Xcode, how we configure some things in Xamarin, how we connect that together, show you some resources, and we'll try and get something running as well, ideally today. The plan is we'll have a project, we'll get it all working, we'll upload it to GitHub, and if it's not quite working by the end of today, we'll just update it until it is, and then everyone's got access to it. Okay, does that seem fair? I can't hear anything. I can see Joel nodding, thumbs up. Awesome.
Sounds awesome.
Cool. I should switch to gallery view. A couple of things I want to make mention. I want to put a call out to my buddy Ryan, who's in the Queensland group, an MVP. He and I have been talking about this process for a while and some of the tools and links. I don't think I could have gotten as far as I could without him. He suggested some really great resources. So there's a few resources here on the screen. Ryan suggested the last one to me, which was really useful. The Widget Center proxy. We'll talk about that in a little bit of time. But there's not many links for this at the moment. So I've been using the iOS 14 area in the Xamarin iOS channel. But let's actually just kick off. So how many people have used a widget? I know, Michael, you have. Feel free to unmute, Michael. We can make this a conversation.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
I can, nice and
Awesome.
clearly. Good to see you again, man.
You too. It's been a while.
So you were saying that you've done an app already that's got widget support for Xamarin.Forms, right? So you would have gone through this similar process. What kind of stuff are you doing?
Yeah, I built a weather app a couple of years ago. So I obviously added some weather widgets.
Cool.
To that.
And you're using, that's in a Xamarin.Forms app, and you're adding widgets to iOS. Do you have Android widgets as well? Just curious.
Nah, I just pulled my Android app a couple of months ago because no one was buying it.
Yeah, it's kind of like a similar experience to me, I think, in that regard. But yeah, it's interesting. Like, did you find many resources for it as you were going through it?
Nah, just the that GitHub link from the official Microsoft announcement blog.
Okay.
Been a bit of chatter there, and just basically through that link, I managed to get the widgets running.
Okay.
Connected, and the sample Microsoft app. Well, it's not Microsoft, but it's on the Microsoft blog. They've got a sample app.
Yeah.
As
cool.
well. Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the ones I'm going to link to today as well. Neat. All right. Cool. And if you want to show it, that's great. If you want to send me a link, I'll actually buy the app and try and show it as well. Always like to see what other people are doing. Neat. All right. So there's a few things I wanted to go through building this widget. First off, I might make sure that I can show you what a widget is. This is actually one of my apps that I'm planning to release next year. So this is actually just a work in process widget. I'm actually just debugging this one at the moment. But a widget is essentially something you can add to a home screen. So like there's some built-in widgets like a calendar, and you can have a small one, a medium one, or a large widget. And you essentially just put it on your screens. And then you order it where you want it to go. Like I might want that to go on another page, for example. Oops, might have to, or move it around. There we go. It's a little bit better. I'll get rid of that one, and might add some more widgets. And you get the idea that you just have information available to you on the home screen whenever you want. I've got no photos, so I might leave that one there. And now you can create your own widgets, of course, like this. So I've got my own for my app that I'm building here called YayTrain, which is a running app. And I've got some widgets basically showing the training that people need to do next. And this is just some early preview work of it, but this is what I'm putting together. But all of this widget code is written in Swift. And I'm going to take you through the process of how you'd actually build that and integrate it into your app. And then the interesting thing about that is the widget itself is a separate app to your Xamarin.Forms iOS app. So you need a way to communicate. So one of the things that you'll need is a capability called an app group in iOS. So iOS doesn't allow you to go outside the sandbox normally, but you can create an app group that's shared by several apps, and it allows for communication. And that communication might be things like just dropping a file. You can also do, I think, other forms of inter-process communication with that. So if you're using some of the POSIX APIs at the lower level Unix system, you can actually go through and use those as well. But creating an app group is actually not that complex. Whenever you create an iOS app, you would typically use Xamarin, or you might use Xcode to create all the identifiers and all those other details. I think when you're working with iOS and you're working with things that are very specific to iOS, so in my case, when I'm working with things like HealthKit or SiriKit or some of the other capabilities like app groups, I normally do this process manually. I just find it a little bit easier. So what I'm going to do is create an app ID. So you can have your app extension or an app group. This is the one I want here. So registering an app group to allow group containers. So I'm going to call this just group.com.glenstevens.Melbourne demo. And that's going to be my app group. I'll give it a description. My app group demo for Melbourne. So there's a little bit of configuration we have to go through. Not a huge amount, but one of the things I do like to do is I like to make sure that I've got something like Visual Studio Code, which is my notepad of choice. And I'm just going to keep all the details there. So that's my app group. I'm going to need to refer that in a few places a little bit later. So I'll register that app group. That's great. See, I've got a couple there. I'm going to create a new identifier, and then I'm going to create the identifier for my actual app. So bundle ID will be explicit. I'm going to call it Melbourne demo.app. Melbourne widget demo app. Oops, I got one too many P's there. Feel free to unmute and ask questions as we go through this as well. I think the part of the demo process can be fairly long. I think my Zoom window is above my bar down the bottom. There's the app. And then I also need one for the widget. I think a lot of people think that the widgets are embedded within the app, and to an extent they are, but they're also separate apps. So here, when I'm registering, there's also some other stuff I need to do. I need to specify that it's got an app group. Maybe I missed that. App. Where's the app group? Might have gone past it. Here we go, app groups. So I'll normally set that, set the description, widget app. I'll continue there, register that. And then also when I've got to that point, I also need to link the widget app here. So I go back in there where I've got my app group, I then have to configure it and then configure it to work against that app group that I've got access to as well. So the app group basically works as a separate folder that you can get access to, that you can store things centrally, that you can communicate between the app and the widget. Cool. So that's one app with identifier done. I need to do the same thing again, just for the widget. So I'll create a new widget. This will be an app. I'll call this my widget and give it a name. Melbourne Demo Widgety. Cool. Make sure I copy that bundle ID. I'll give that an app group permission as well. I'm going to do essentially the same thing that I did before. I'll go ahead and configure it, configure the app group that it works against that particular app. Configure the app groups there. Neat. So that configuration is done. So I don't think anyone normally uses app groups. Has anyone used app groups before? I'm not sure if I can see the chat message here. Oh, yeah, there is chat. Lachlan, not you. Yeah, it's very rare. And some of these capabilities, most people aren't even aware of when they're doing Xamarin.Forms because by and large, you don't need it. But imagine, we're doing this for widgets, but imagine the process. You've got a series of apps that you're selling, and you actually might want to share some of the information between them. So for example, if Michael's got a weather app, and then he's also got an app that that alerts garages, for example, if you've got hail, you might want some shared location data where you can put the weather information, and then the garages could look at that weather information and do something else with it. So app groups don't just work for the widget scenario, they work generally between apps. And you can use that if you've got some ideas and you're trying to be a little bit creative with it. Cool. So that's the identifiers. And then after that, you'll go through the process of creating profiles. So you'll create the provisioning profiles. I'm going to do one here for iOS. And I know you might go, well, wouldn't I not worry about this with a simulator? But you actually need to do it just because of the app groups, in my experience. So I need to find the Melbourne one here. There's a lot of these. If I go past it, let me know. Melbourne widget app. There we go. So I'll continue that. I've got the one certificate. I'll select all because I cleared them out lately. And Melbourne widget app profile. So many things to do here, but it's about configuration, and you have to get the configuration right. I'll download that. Just put it to the desktop. It zooms in the way a little bit. Cool. So we've got that one. Go back to the profiles, do one more, and this is going to be for the widget. Why didn't I just type in the first place? There's the other one. Select the certificates. Select all my devices. And call that widgety. Nice. Go ahead and save that. And there's the two profiles that I have locally. So I'm going to open these with Xcode. It's one of those things I only recently downloaded the latest version of Xcode and also Big Sur. So if there's things that are a little bit amiss, we can certainly go through that as well. Cool. Anyone have any questions so far? No. And one of the things I've found with provisioning profiles is I actually tend to restart Visual Studio for the Mac. It doesn't tend to pick up the provisioning profile of registration as easily as I would like.
Do you know why you need to have a provisioning, like special provisioning profiles for a widget? Like I know that Apple says so you do it. It just seems like a feature that, does it really need that complication?
Well, you can have I think you can have a standalone widget as well. So it's a separate app, so it needs signing by a publisher. Otherwise you've got just an app that's doing nothing and then the widget.
Okay, so you're basically preparing a separate app, not that you kind of connect to your app, not just and that kind of explains why you need an app group, because it lets you share the data between the widget and the app. It's not just a fancy icon for the one app.
No, that's right.
Cool.
Excellent. Good question. All right. So I've got my profiles and all those other details ready. In theory, what I should be able to do is go to the next step, which is to create the project. And for this, I'm going over to Xcode. So I'm going to create a new Xcode project here. How many people are familiar with Swift? I got to admit that I'm not the best at Swift. Yeah, I can see a few of you shaking your head there as well. Rod, not me. Yeah, I'm a little bit like that as well. I don't mind the language. It's on the to-do list. I used to write Swift. Lachlan. Okay, cool. Yeah, so like you need to know a little bit to work with this. But it's not too much. Like in today's exercise, we'll just do the very, very basics to show you the fundamentals about how connecting things in. And there's some good resources you can do to learn Swift. Yeah, I must admit I prefer Xamarin as well. Cool. So I'm going to create a new app here. And this app is really not going to do much at all. So I'm going to give the product name, which is going to be Melbourne Widget app. And as the org identifier, I'll actually change the bundle identifier in just a minute. I'm just going to move some stuff around. Go ahead and create that. And that'll create the code for me. That's the app at the very least. And you can kind of see a very simple user interface. I should be able to run that in just a second. I'm not going to run it just yet. I want to add the widget in first. I've got the Zoom window showing over everything. Go back to Xcode. Cool. Now from here, I'm going to go product and it's actually file. I want to add target. Has this changed somewhere? Maybe it has. There's a new target. I just need to find where that's gone to. Maybe it's the same place. Navigate, find new file, new target. Here we go. All right. So what I want to add here is the iOS widget. So there's the widget extension. That's the one I'm adding in. You can see how much I use Xcode rather than Xamarin. I know my way around Xamarin. All right. Melbourne. Widgety. All right, so that's going to connect to the widget app and it's going to embed in that application. So I'll just finish that there. So I'll activate that. That's for building and debugging. And essentially under the products, then I've got a couple of targets. I've got the app itself and also the widget extension. And under here, there's the code to run the iOS app in Swift and also the code to run the widget app. So even if in this case here, where I've got the widget running, it's essentially doing a few things like preparing the user interface, like showing like a simple date in its timeline. So there's a couple of concepts here that it works with. The widgets work with this concept of a timeline where it shows information that's going to be presented at a particular point in time. So there's this class here called timeline entry. And essentially what you would do is you would have a class that inherits from timeline entry that has your additional information alongside it as well. We've got the timeline provider, which is essentially how do I load the information about the provider, and there's several methods that are in there. Things like the ability to get a timeline based on some criteria. So you'd often hit some service like a REST service, for example, or you'd calculate that locally. I'm just looking at the comments there as well. Michael, I did a Pluralsight course and some YouTube videos to get the basics down pat for my app. Yeah, that's a good idea. I found that the Apple WWDC conference app had a bunch of videos as well that were really good for widgets. And there were some guides in there too, which is another good resource. So the provider gets the information, returns it. The simple entry here just represents an entry that you're typically showing in the widget. And then we've got the user interface for the view, and I'll just resume that. I've got my provider entry, which is typically going to be a simple entry. And then it's really just displaying the text there. There's the entry date. And you can have some other text in there as well. Hey, Melbourne. And I want to group those together. So that's like a stack layout, a vertical stack layout. They've got the V stacks, the X stacks, and also the Z stacks, which is more like an absolute layout where you're layering things on top of each other. Cool. So that's a very simple example of what a widget might be. We typically go into the project options at this point. This is one of those things where I always find myself getting a little bit lost in the Xcode configuration, I must admit. There we go. Cool. So it's got the widget for the application and also for, sorry, the extension here as well. So you can see the bundle identifier for the app. This is where I want to go back to my app ID, put that in. For the widget extension, I want to do the same thing. And normally with this, there's also some other details that I would need to add in as well. So if I just scroll down, signing and capabilities. This is one of the things where I'm going, okay, where is the part? There is one part that I'm missing here, which is the ability to add the app group. That's embedding it. It's good. All right. So I'm going to try and run the application here. Oh, that's my phone that's connected. I'm going to connect just an iPhone 11 in this particular case, and I'll go ahead and run this. And this should run the application, but also should install the widget, because as the app installs, the widget should as well. Now, where have we got? Got a bundle issue. I might have to go. Here's one I prepared earlier. I don't have. Yeah, I thought I messed that up. I must have. I did. Should have done app.mywidget. Let's go ahead and fix that. Or why don't I take you through the other parts to it? I certainly don't want to lose anyone with it, but this configuration might take a little bit of time. How's everyone following along so far? It's really hard to tell with everything so silent. No? Have I lost anyone yet?
No, you haven't lost this.
Okay, cool. All right. So I would need to fix this app ID. I might actually go back another way and show you. I'll reverse engineer it. I think I've shown you how to create the provision profile, create the project in Xcode. So I'm going to open up the previous one in Xcode that I have, which is the A train. I'll show you my personal one. So this is a very similar situation to what I did before. I just got the IDs right in this one. So where I have an app and also have the widget, and then I have the products and the embedded details for them as well. So if I run the app, I'll keep that running on the mini. Then I should be able to see the details for it. Let's close that 11 down. So there's the widget. There's the app, which is really just a shell. This iOS app doesn't really do anything. It's really just there to kind of cement the structure. If you're creating an extension for iOS, you tend to have to install it with an app as well, which I know what I was talking about before, Lachlan, doesn't make much sense in regards to the fact that why would you have your own provisioning profile for a widget compared to an app? But when you think about stuff like the Apple Watch extensions, you can have standalone Apple Watch apps as well, and they would live in their own extension. So yeah, there's a kind of a weird byproduct, but you could ship them separately. All right, I might have to turn off notifications. Ah, my goodness. Do not disturb.
Oh, there's new things up in that menu in Big Sur.
Yeah, it's not too bad. There's some good things. So here within the widget, this is where the widget has the level of complexity. So I've got a few things that are going on here. I've got my my DTO. So I've got this process where I'm using the app group to communicate from the Xamarin app into the widget. So in that case, what's happening is I'm using JSON serialization to basically store the file from Xamarin directly. And then on the Swift side, I'm just reading the file and deserializing that. Now, like I said, my Swift isn't the best. I openly admit that. So what I was using was QuickType. A lot of you might be using this already. So I had a basic structure that was able to create the Swift code for me to open that file and start using it, which is really what I was after. And then if I wanted to do that on the C# side, then of course I could change that there too, and I'd have the code to actually generate and populate the data that I wanted to share between the apps. So if you're not using QuickType already, I would highly encourage it. I'll just paste that link into the chat window. I imagine some of you are using it already, yeah?
Sorry, Glenn, what's QuickType for?
So QuickType allows you to write code based on JSON. So you can convert things like JSON and create serializers and deserializers for that format. So if I've got a format like this here on the left, I've got it set as some JSON file, some JSON content here, it will generate the code for me that allows me to load that into a structure. So here's the train status data transfer object. And if I added something else in, so maybe I added something like location Melbourne, then that will update the object and display the details. So here's my C# code for it. But if I wanted to open that up and make sure it was consistent, I could generate the Swift code for that for the widgets use to load that and process it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So it's a really good tool to use. And if you're just doing C#, I tend to use the one JSON to C#. But QuickType works just as well. All right. So essentially all this file was generated with the QuickType IO. I've got some other code here as well. So this is some code I've got here, which is I'm just kind of debugging at the moment. And this is kind of interesting. This is where the code for loading between the app group lives. So in Swift, what I'm doing is I'm using the file managers or the default file manager's ability to get the container URL for my app group ID. And then once I've got that, then I'm adding the file name to the end of it. I'm trying to see if the data is there. And if it is, then I want to do something with it. So at the moment, my data is not processing, but I'm getting to that point where it's loading it and I'm working it. And it's just a work in progress. But essentially, this is the part you'll do. So you'll load the content somewhere from the file and then return that to the app group. So in this case here, I'm just going to move the screen here. I've got my provider. I've got my placeholder. So the placeholder is interesting in that when you load the widget in that screen, cool. So when you load a widget, so I'm editing the home screen and then I'm adding a widget. So if I've got an app like the screen time, the placeholder is what's displayed during this preview screen. So what's the data that's going to be used to populate the view? So SwiftUI uses model view update. So it'll pass the model detail to your user interface in order to view. So there's the get snapshot, which gets the data and for a single entry, and there's the get timeline, which will get a series of entries as well. So in my case, the get timeline, this is the real data that's being read. It reads from that file in the app group and then does something with the data in it. So it creates an entry. That entry gets passed essentially to the view and it's presented. So in my case here, I've got a few views. I've got a small view, a medium view, and a large view. I think that's kind of just a little embedded widget. And then I've got the entry view itself. So here I'm working out what widget I'm using, loading a background within the app, and then showing the various display for it. So medium view or the small view, whatever's really needed. I think the large view is just the medium view with some extra information underneath it.
Good.
But if I look at, yes.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I'm using the SBS widget, which is a news widget, right?
Yeah.
What I've noticed is that there's a delay between when news gets updated and when it displays within the widget. How does that, you're writing to some file space that's shared between the widget and the actual app. How often is that updated to the widget?
Well, it's updated when you choose it to be. There's another API that lives and allows for communication between the app. So, for example, when I update my app, when the status of the app updates to a point where I need to inform the widget, there's an API you can call to tell it to refresh its timelines. And it should do that straight away. Yeah, and that's a different API, and that API is actually not available in the Xamarin libraries at the moment. And for that, we're going to use a custom binding that's available. I'm not sure if Michael's using that in his, but there's some situations where you want that to happen. So in my case, what I've got here is a running app, and when the running schedule for today's workout changes, I want the widget to update so it reflects what the person has to do next. That's really all I want it to display. The widgets are really good at just informing the user of the basic information they need. I like the fact that it just kind of lets people know what they need rather than having to open the app and go through all those processes. But yeah, you kind of need to allow for communication there too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And Michael's got a response there.
Sorry?
Michael's got a response in the chat.
Oh, cool. The NuGet package is there, but not there. He has the version hidden. Okay, I'm not quite sure what you mean, the NuGet package. There's a NuGet package available?
Yeah, the guy released it on NuGet, but he then pulled it. So you need to know the exact version number if you want to use the NuGet package instead of your own custom binding.
Yeah, okay, cool. No, I'm using the package, but I didn't realize there was a NuGet package available for it. That's good to know. And even the process of building that, having a NuGet package is going to be significantly easier. Yeah, that's good. If you want to send the NuGet package in the chat window, Michael, that'd be good. I'm guessing it does the same thing, which uses the widget proxy and just informs your widget to update its timeline. Cool. You didn't know you were presenting, did you, Michael? All right, so we've got the widgets here. I'll just go to the small view just to kind of give it a demo of what it is. And it's basically a very simple view. Has this Z stack. So it's like the Z order. So from the back to the front. So the first item is at the back, the next item's in the front. So in my case here, I've got an image. So that's a background view class that I made, and then a vertical stack with a bunch of text elements and some of the styling around that. And that should update there in the right. And essentially that's very similar to what I would use for the SwiftUI. My view is that the widget only needs to reflect the information I'm passing into it from the app. So I'm keeping my user interface here as simple as I can get it, and then present it. And most of the other views, like the medium view and the large view, they all basically use that pattern. And this is still a work in progress. It's not quite finished, the full version. I'm not happy with the display or the user experience with it, and I'll update that over the next month or so on my weekends when I normally work on this. All right, so I've also got things like the widget, which is the widget itself. What's the configuration? How do I get that the detail for it? What's the name of it? What's the description? And what's the supported family? So I might only want to support a small icon, a medium, or a large, or it's just a set that I can use. And then there's the previews. So this is normally set up when you create the template. And in this case here, I'm creating the view and specifying which family I want to present in the window. So if I resume that, it would put the system large widget, and in probably a minute or so, I'd be able to see that and start working with it. Might be a little bit less. Cool. Yeah, it might take a little bit of time, but essentially that's the process for setting up the Xcode side. Oh, cool. There's the widget there, and you can see all the details here.
Oh.
Yeah, so I could change that and go, okay, what is the medium like that? And then it should update, and then I can see the details and I can tweak it. I think initially when you create this, it will create just the small one for you to use. My suggestion when you're working with a SwiftUI is to start creating your own custom views. So if you look at things like the Z stacks and the V stacks, they only allow about essentially 10 items as children. I found that really weird. Like it should be almost an unlimited amount based on memory. But I found I'd have to create views and embed those views in it. So things like the large stack, I would have the view for my background, that's right at the back, a spacer, just for a little bit of space, a vertical stack, which is that top-down approach. So what am I on the, let's go to the small view.
Do you have to make it only one widget size that you ship, or can you ship various sizes and let the user choose?
So I'm not sure what you were saying there, Lachlan. It was garbling up.
Can you only ship one size of widget, or can you ship multiple sizes and have the user choose which widget they see?
Well, you can do multiples, but you only have the small, medium, and large.
Yeah.
So you specify which ones are supported. So if I if I remove the large from this set, then it would be displayed when I'm configuring it in the IDE. Cool. Excellent. So that's the Xcode side of things. So I'm going to switch back to Xamarin. And on the Xamarin side, I might just open up my app and you can kind of see the process here. I think I've got the widget code here that's running. It's probably open. Maybe not. So within my app, I've got a system that I might actually just go ahead and run this so you can see. So this is the app that I've been working on. So whenever I was training at Xamarin University years ago, I always took the opinion that it's no use training other people if you're not doing it yourself. So I was always trying to build something. I thought that made the work I was doing better, and also built my portfolio of apps. So this is one of the apps that I've been building for a time, which is a running app. Most people don't know this, but I'm a level 2 advanced rec running coach with Athletics Australia. I don't do it that much. I'm probably more a data kind of guy with that aspect. But this particular tool I've been working on for a while. There's a bunch of running plans created by Chris Wardlaw, who is a chairman of Athletics Australia, former Olympian and Olympic coach for the Australian team. So it's something that's been in the pipeline for a while. But I've got essentially a running app with adaptive coaching and kind of intelligent decision-making around the coaching experience. So we can adjust people's training, etc. So that's the spiel of the app. It does corrections where other apps don't, and looks after the health and well-being of athletes more than a lot of others. But essentially, the main interface is this dashboard. So the dashboard for me, it'll update every day when it runs. It goes, this is what you do on that day, or this is what you're going to do tomorrow if today's a rest day. And it just displays that information. So my view for the widget, when I saw what widgets were coming out with iOS 14, is that I wanted to display this information within the widget. Now, I've already got this calculated. So what I'm doing here in the app is whenever this calculates, I'm updating the widget. I've got this right widget update service that passes in the details I want to transfer over to the Swift app, which is the widget, and then send those details over. Let me just move some things around. I've got my screen blocked. And what you can see here is actually something very similar to what I'm doing in the Swift code. So I'm essentially, I've got the data object, I'm serializing that, just using JSON.NET. And I'm also getting the file manager's get container URL and then passing that information through, getting the container, getting the URL, or essentially the full path of where that's being stored within the app group, and then removing it, removing the file if it exists, updating the file. So I'm just testing a little bit of this. I'm finding some differences between using the system IO classes and also the NS file manager classes. So I'm just doing some experiments at the moment to make sure this works as well as it can. If you've worked with background services in iOS before, some of the APIs there that pass you files are incompatible with using system IO, and you end up having to use things like NS file manager. But in this case here, I'm just logging some details here. And then after that's finished, I'm telling the app to reload all the timelines. So I think that was Rod, you're asking about how can you reload the timelines? Was that you?
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah, so it's essentially this process here. Widget send a proxy, reload all timelines. So what I was doing is I was using the GitHub repository for it. And this is where Michael's really helpful today. So there's this. There's this URL. I'll paste this in the chat window as well. But Widget send a proxy is essentially a binding mechanism for the widget center APIs. So Michael's code there, if UI device, current device is on 14 or greater, then reload all the timelines. That'll essentially update them. And when you navigate back to the screen, then you should see the change. So, but normally what I was doing was I was building this myself. This has actually got a bunch of issues with it. So things like this particular issue I had to fix. I would recommend going through this vendor framework if you need to. There's essentially a batch file that you run, which will build the Xcode library code for you and populate the Xamarin binding library in there. But it also requires you to download Embedding 4000 and also do a bunch of things. The configuration for it is pretty full on. That's this build.fat.sh. Yeah, I don't think, Michael, you went through this process if you found or maybe you did, but
nah, I just used the Nuga package straight away.
Yeah,
so
and
I didn't go through that pain.
And that's the smarter choice. And if I was aware of that, I think if Ryan was aware of that as well, we would have probably done something very similar. Cool. All right.
Len, can I ask a question? I'm missing something here. On
Sure.
what capabilities have you got on the Xcode? So what I mean is the existing widgets that I've seen are they're basically just displaying stuff. Do you have capabilities to have a scrolling list, for example? So can I have 15 items and scroll through them on a medium-sized widget? That sort of stuff. What capabilities you got from the UI point of view?
Yeah, Rod, just bear with me. I think my internet's dropped a little bit. I'm not sure where my 5G dropped out.
We're still hearing and seeing you fine, Glenn.
Yeah, my audio is a bit warbled though. I can't hear the things that everyone's saying. I fear it's a little bit shaky. If you don't mind having a break for a couple of minutes, I'm going to go upstairs and just grab the very long blue Ethernet cable, and then continue on. Is that okay for everyone?
No worries.
Yeah, just bear with me.
This for everyone's information is the planned toilet break.
Yes, and I've actually got some intermission slides. I'm going to do a quick recap of .NET Conf now.
Perfect.
Except I can't while Glenn is still sharing his screen, so scrap that.
Now you've got it.
Excellent.
Do you?
I cannot share screen while other participant is sharing.
Sorry.
Rod started sharing.
Try now.
Alrighty, so last week was .NET Conf, which is Microsoft's once a year online conference all about .NET, and they announce and launch lots of cool products there, but also stacks of sessions, both from Microsoft employees and also community members. So it was a 3-day conference, and there are 79 sessions all up on that YouTube playlist. I'll post that link in the chat in a moment. So check that out. Lots of cool Xamarin and Blazor stuff there. As far as Xamarin announcements go, Hot Reload 2.0 has been launched. You might have seen that if you've been using the preview features. It was called Hot Reload brackets changes only, which makes it sound like it's just a slight extra feature, but it's a complete rewrite that works, kind of integrates with how UWP and WPF do it. So that's pretty cool. Hot Restart has also come out of preview. That lets you kind of just load in any new C# stuff and relaunch the app. So it doesn't bring it into your running app, but it's a much quicker way to launch an app that you've been working on. And it also means you can debug on an iPhone from your Windows computer without a Mac. And yeah, just quicker debugging basically. And then also Xamarin.Forms 5 is just about to be launched, and they did some sessions there talking about that sort of stuff. So there are the links. Don't worry about copying this down now. I'll post them in the chat as well. Maddie Leger posted a nice recap of the Xamarin related announcements in a blog post. And then also the Xamarin podcast, which is a monthly or sometimes fortnightly podcast about everything going on in the Xamarin world. So check out the latest episode of that, and also just always listen to it. Hosted by Matt Sokop and James Montemagno. In terms of Blazor announcements, lots of cool stuff. So .NET 5 has just been launched. .NET 5 being the next version of .NET Core, basically. We're skipping 4, and .NET Framework, .NET Core, and Mono are all converging into one awesome product, .NET 5. Along with that, we've got the new virtualize element, which if you've got lots and lots of content, instead of having to, on your long Blazor page, particularly if it's a list of items, it can only render to the DOM whatever elements are currently visible instead of having all of them there. So it'll make it a lot more performant. We've also got WebAssembly pre-renders just come out, which means if you're using the WebAssembly version of Blazor, you can have the first page rendered server-side. So the main downside with WebAssembly Blazor at the moment is it only takes, first time you load it, might take 10 seconds or so to load. This will mean your first load will be basically instant, and then it transfers all the slow stuff over the network. Also helping with that is assembly lazy loading. So you only need to load in the bits you actually need. And then they've also got CSS isolation so that you can link certain style sheets to certain pages. And also in preview, Azure static sites, which is a better experience for hosting static sites like WebAssembly Blazor. So that's pretty cool too. And that ties in with Azure functions quite nicely. So that's my quick recap of .NET Conf. Definitely check it out. Lots of cool presentations to check out all around Blazor and Xamarin and other .NET stuff as well. After Glenn finishes up his presentation, for anyone who wants to stick around and have a chat, we'll be hanging out. So if we want to talk about anything to do with Glenn's presentation or anything .NET Conf or Apple Silicon or anything you want to, stick around and we can chat about that. Looks like Glenn is back. So I'm going to hand back over to Glenn now.
Cool.
How'd you go? Did you find your Ethernet cable?
I did. Yeah, it was running nice and smoothly when I was sitting down to do it. So I thought, that's fine. It's normally the case, but sometimes the internet just drops out. I think everyone here in Queensland is watching State of Origin or avoiding watching State of Origin, and the internet connectivity is just awful. Awesome. So I wanted to go to the next point, which was that how do I get the widget that's written in Xcode embedded in your application? So there's a link here. I think I've already pasted it in, but I'll paste it in directly again, which is this one here, and there's the embedded widget kit support. Until this page existed, it was kind of a little bit tricky to work out how do you get a reference to the Xcode project and embed it in your app. But essentially what you need to do is add this app extension into your application. So for something like Visual Studio for Mac, you would right click on the project and select edit the project file here. And you actually have to go into the XML of the C# project and then actually start working with it. So in my case here, if I scroll down towards the bottom, I should be able to see the widget. In fact, if I just do a search for widget, then I can see the details here. Here's the YayTrain Runners widget extension. If I'm building it for the iPhone, I'm going to use this particular folder. If I'm building for the iPhone simulator, I'm going to use this particular folder here. So when you're building for Xcode, you need to follow the instructions here. I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. There's the project settings on the SwiftUI extension. So if you go File, Project Settings, there'll be the project relative location. You need to enter this because I found that if you don't, then you have really no idea where the project is. I couldn't find it, to be honest. So I would set the project relative location, and then it would have the appropriate folder for me to use. And then I could substitute that folder here. If I look at the sample code here, things like build, debug, iPhone OS, or build, debug, iPhone simulator, I found that those values actually don't match what's in the build output from the standard template from Xcode, and I would have to tweak them. So in this case here, I'm using a full path. I do want to get this a little bit more continuous integration friendly. And then if I look at this particular path, let me just open that up. Then I can see the output. So there's the debug iPhone OS, and there's the app extension and the app, and likewise there's the ones for the simulator. So you just make sure you've got a reference to that path. I find it matches this configuration more than the one that's listed on the Xamarin page. I might actually do some manual updates for that. I'm just trying to collect all the learnings before I update. And the plan is, like I said before, is to write a blog article just outlining how to do this and how to do it consistently and take away all the pain points, really, because I think there's just a lot of, it's still early and it's in a lot of preview. So there's the debug iPhone simulator. That will then embed it. So if I look at the app here, you can see I'm using the proxy binder. I might actually use Michael's suggestion in my next build. I won't do it today, but I'll add that in. The other thing that's important is that in your iOS project that you have the entitlements set. So normally you would go to the entitlements, you'd say, I need to specify the app group, and then specify the app group that you're running for that project. So that's going to give you access to write to that particular space. If you don't have that, then the writing really won't work. In this particular case, that's probably the only one that I've got enabled here that's relevant to WidgetKit. So that means when this app launches, it should also launch the widget as well. If I scroll up, I've got the widget here. This is failing on the data. So it's actually got the data, but it's not processing it right at the moment. I think I've got some misformed XML in there at the moment. But essentially, that's working pretty well. I'll edit the home screen here. I'm going to add another widget. I think there's some issues with the timeline data I've got to correct, but essentially that's the process you would go through. Once you have the data, find a way to store it within the app group, notify the widget that the timeline has changed, and then it should update and then present appropriately. So that's essentially the process of going through it. I was hoping that I would be able to just go end to end, but I think I made some early mistakes that'll allow it not to do that that's essentially the process. I'm trying to think if there's something else that that I left out. I did make a checklist. Cool. Any questions on the process? That's gone very quiet.
Do you think there will be a way that we'll be able to do this with Xamarin.Forms instead of just write it in Swift and ship it with a Xamarin app?
I can't really comment on what the Xamarin team are doing. Like, I've not been part of the Xamarin team for a few years. So yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the intent is there. That's probably something I would just ask David Ortnow on Twitter. So what's the likelihood there? Yeah, you would have a direct understanding of it.
There's nothing that you're doing there that's, I mean, it would be relatively simple to do the Xamarin bindings for that. There's nothing extravagant that you're doing there, is there?
I'm not sure, Rod. I think the internet is actually just cutting out for me again. I'm not quite sure why that is. I can't quite hear what you're saying, unfortunately.
Maybe it's my internet.
No, Rod, I think you're fine.
Yeah, it might be me. I'm running Ethernet here, but it's just running terribly. It's but let me see if I got the question right. I think you're saying it would be able to nice to convert Xamarin.Forms views to widget views. Yeah, I think so too. I think everyone wants good reuse between the various user interface elements and how they'd go about that. I'm not sure what the perfect answer is there. I think, well, actually, the perfect answer is having C# everywhere. But yeah, ideally, you'd like to do that. You want to minimize it. My view is that when I'm running the widgets, I just want them as a very simple presentation layer from data that I'm sending from the Xamarin app.
Okay.
I guess thinking a little bit more, my guess would be Xamarin. So writing C# instead of Swift would probably be very doable by the Xamarin team if they decide it's a priority. But getting Xamarin.Forms in there would be a bit trickier because it's all an abstraction on top of UI kit, whereas SwiftUI, the Xamarin team aren't really touching because it's a kind of language level feature and a different paradigm instead of really a UI library. Does that feel right to you? I've never touched any SwiftUI, so I don't know.
Yeah. Again, the audio is coming through a little bit garbled, Lachlan, so I can't quite hear. I'm almost feeling like disconnecting and reconnecting to see if I can get a better signal.
Let's try chat. I just put a chat question up there.
Yeah, what UI capabilities do you have in Swift for widgets? The current widgets are really display only. Can I do scrolling within a widget, like medium sized? Yeah, there are widget APIs for doing things like flicking them as well. So if I look at the simulator here, I'll just remove that widget for a second. I add a new widget. Like, there's things like the Smart Stack, which may not be available on it, but it essentially allows you to scroll through a series of things. So it would be the same width as like a medium, typically like a medium widget, and you can scroll through it. So it might have appointments, you scroll up and it might show the calendar, it might show your photos, etc. And it's a little bit adaptive as well, but that gives you a scrolling API to use. And there are classes in there to allow you to have the same capability, where you have a number of display areas for scrolling.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's a built-in widget container, isn't it? Yeah, let me see if I can project my screen. I can't even remember the name of it. What's the name of the app that you project your screen with? It's been a while since I've used it.
I usually use QuickTime. Is that not how you do it?
Reflector. Sorry, I was just having a little blank at the moment. So if I see if I can connect to it. I'm not sure if it's going to connect with Big Sur, but it looks like it's doing the right thing. So can you drag and drop widgets to create a stack you can flick through? I know, I think it's more along the lines of you design a widget that works that way. So there on my screen here, I've got a couple of widgets like the weather widget and also the battery widget. But if I wanted to, oh, there's my widget on the screen there. If I wanted to create a new widget, I would just edit the home screen, add one in. There's the smart stack, which gives me the ability to scroll it. Add that in. And then you can see some awful photos of me as well as some other details. So you can then scroll through the layers of that. Can you see the interface? I'm just swiping up on the interface. So yeah, there are APIs that allow you to do that.
Right. And can I put alarms and things like that? So
yeah, there's plenty of them in there. So it's just a matter of picking the right one for you, essentially. So you can create your own. You can, like, I think there's layers of widgets. I would recommend looking at the widget guides that Apple publicize or that Apple publish, and then looking at various videos from WWDC. I think those have been pretty informative. Cool. I think everyone's looking at my phones and going, "You've got 341 missed calls. That's a lot of missed calls." That's all right. Can a widget launch an app without a click? Absolutely. So I'm going to tap on the widget here, and it just opens the app. That's what it does.
Without a click. You clicked on it.
Oh, without a click. Well, it was a tap, not a click. No, you typically just have it there. I think the purpose of the widget is to inform. And if you want to go deeper into the details, then you tap on it. I think if you want to launch something without a click, you'd probably just use something like SiriKit and then talk to Siri about launching it and doing it that way.
No, I mean, I know what it's designed for. I'm trying to work out how to abuse it. Can I, at a certain point in time, get a widget to launch an app?
Oh, I see what you mean. Like, yeah, executing. I would tend to think that that's probably something that Apple don't want happening. I don't think any OS on the mobile platforms would want to launch another app directly like that. It might, but I think you could do that, but you'd probably have to use the existing mechanisms that are there. Yeah, you might have a widget that has a timer that sends an interface to somewhere, and then that in turn sends a push notification to activate some service within another app. You just have to look at the limitations that you have. Apple tend to sandbox the runtime isolation pretty well.
So everyone on mute, do you have any other questions?
Is there a size limit like for NS extension apps? Yeah, I'm not sure. There might be. I haven't reached it. I'm keeping mine pretty light, and even though I've got graphics in mine, so this is some photos I took a few weeks ago. There's I'm tending to think I'm going to go gradients and try and reduce the size as much as possible. But yeah, I think it would be worthwhile finding out. I'm yet to hit a size limit with the apps that I've got, I must admit. But yeah, ideally you want to keep them small. I think to a certain extent, Swift uses a lot of libraries that are already on the devices. That's why having Swift extensions or even apps for Apple Watch might be a little bit more useful right now using Swift, but having Xamarin as the core app. Yeah, I think that's an interesting question there. I'm curious to find out about that myself.
Is there much in common developing these with developing app clips. Have you looked into them at all?
No, not yet. It is something I want to look at. But it's one of those things that when you're trying to ship an app, then you tend to focus on what you have left rather than the shiny new features that are just going to add months to your schedule. Because even things like Siri Kit took me a while to get a grasp on, to make sure it was working consistently. And I think the widgets are a little bit like that as well. So we're working with custom bindings, and we're working with inter-process communication that may not be entirely smooth. And then I'm working with a language that I'm not familiar with, trying to get good sense of that as well, and making sure that things are in place. But yeah, I'm not sure if that answered your question though, Lachlan.
Yeah, I guess so. The other question I saw earlier on, when you were updating the timelines, it was an async task, and inside there you had a task.run, and inside that you had a lock.
Yeah.
Is there a horror story behind that and that we should be aware of?
No, I was just
write task.runs for fun.
I was a little bit more concerned that there was going to be an issue with writing out to it at multiple times. So I was just trying to be hyper safe. That's all. I didn't want re-entry into that call, especially if I just didn't want it. I think that's probably being a little bit too vigilant. But yeah, I only wanted the output file to be generated once, and the informing of the widgets to update only once. It's probably more the informing of widgets. I didn't want that just flying out all the time, saying refresh the timeline, especially if it was in some half state. That's what I was trying to avoid.